we have Angelo, who was presenting earlier. He is facilitating the panel discussion. We have Satish, we heard him earlier, and we have Domagoj from Teva. He was introduced by his colleague, and we have Alan from Alvotech as well. So enjoy the panel discussion.
All right, great. Well, good to see everybody again. Now I'm standing instead of lunch, in between you and lunch, standing between you and dinner. First of all, there's one more to go. One more to go. Okay. Again, a luggage update. May not get here until I leave, so I'll keep you guys posted. If you see me tomorrow and the same thing, you know what happened. But this should be actually a pretty fun panel. I have an awesome group here next to me. And I think just to build on it, would love to hear from some of the breakout sessions, because these breakout sessions and these challenger peers were really quite powerful and speak to what this panel is meant to be, which is how is the future of MES scale in this industry. We had everything from a conversation around cloud to how does MES deliver on PHARMA 4.0, and even talking about how does MES fit into a dark factory in the future. So we'd love to open it up just to the audience quickly to see what some of that feedback was. I know there are some of the moderators from those breakout sessions, because I think fundamentally that will help set the baseline for this conversation, which is about how do you scale these future systems. So does anyone want to share any of the learnings, any of the moderators from those breakout sessions we just had, challenger peers? Oh, great.
Hi, so I can quickly share. We had this topic there, so MES in the cloud, just very holistic, what everyone is seeing, if they are discussing about it, thinking of it. And not surprisingly, we listed down quite some concerns and challenges everyone sees moving to the cloud. We also had the discussion on high-level cloud, so not really going into details if it's the software as a service or platform or infrastructure as a service. But just holistically, it seems that there are still a lot of concerns moving into that direction. Although we also see some advantages, so we will see. So I'm from J&J, so we will implement Verum in the cloud next year, hopefully. So in a year, I can hopefully share more information about this.
Awesome. Fantastic. And so first of all, I forgot to introduce my speakers. So we're going to come back to cloud here in a minute, but if you guys just want to say hi and share a quick little intro. I know, Alan, you were the only one that hasn't spoken, I believe, today. But if you guys want to just quickly say hi and introduce yourselves.
We start with Alan.
Yeah, okay. My name's Alan Searles. I work for a company called Alvotech in Iceland. It's a biosimilar startup, tiny little company on a tiny little island. And recently, last year, became kind of head of digital innovation. I invented a really cool title for a business card. But we're basically trying, because we're small, we have an opportunity to kind of digitize, hopefully relatively quickly. And I think it's my third or fourth time at this event over the last 8 years. And it's been fun watching this evolve, kind of this conversation. It's good. That's me.
Awesome.
Hi, my name is Domagoj. I'm working in Teva as a business owner for MES. So I'm overlooking all MES implementations as we are doing it through enterprise rollout, as Miran was saying. So I'm working in a company for the last 15 years, and for this job, I'm last 5 years. So I've been through most of the implementations that from the start. So a lot of learnings in the way, how to do it faster and easier. And the good thing that when you're repeating the rollouts, you are getting more experience and you are learning and making it better.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm Satish. So I don't want to repeat myself. I already did the presentation, so I don't want to be boring for the audience. So looking forward for the panel discussion.
All right, fantastic. Well, great. So what's interesting about, I'm sorry, I forgot your name from J&J? Elizabeth? Great. So what Elizabeth was just talking about was, there's different... Isabel. Thank you, Alan.
Isabel.
Okay, Isabel, yes. So there's different ways that we can think about MES of the future, and there's different layers to it. One on cloud is kind of the enabling layer. It's a technology layer. Then we talked about, there have been many talks today about what does the future of this industry even look like, both in terms of the molecule, in terms of the technique. We heard from the breakout session over there, maybe we might even get to a dark factory in the future, who knows? But interesting too, we also heard from your talk about how these systems still have to go through the regulatory process and the validation of it all. So we'd love to set the baseline around what do we even think the future of life sciences looks like, because then we can work backwards from there and talk about these different components, whether it's the tech, val, or even what does even factory look like. So does anyone want to share kind of what we think life sciences will look like in the future?
Could I ask one question?
Of course.
To what you were saying, the concerns. What are the concerns? Is it data integrity? Is it compliance? So because the data is it's not in a server downstairs being managed by the IT nerds, you don't trust it. There's that sense of that lack of confidence associated with it. I think that's fascinating. Can I give my little bank?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what we could do is start with kind of the enabling layer, the technology layer, and then we'll kind of build up to where we think the future of MES is going. Yeah, sounds great.
No, because I've had this conversation loads of times over the last decade, and I was completely against IT or GMP data in the cloud 5 years ago. I was the blocker in our company for going for Viva, until they explained to me why this was a better idea than keeping it on a server in-house. And the example or the analogy I was using is it's like keeping all your money in a safe under your bed. And you know the PIN code for the safe, and you put the money in there, and you just assume it's there until you have to go and get the money, and it's gone, and you have no idea that somebody's taken it. Why don't you just give the money to the bank? That's their job. And the cloud is basically a bank for data. They do much more security tests. The amount of resources that they spend on ensuring that your data is secure, is backed up, is far more than we can spend the money on internally. Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. Adding to Alan, this was also some of the, when you talk about cloud before 10 years, no, definitely not. GMP data, how you want to store those data in cloud. But now there's been a buzzword in the last few years, and now the manufacturing IT has really started to think about hosting the cloud-based applications. There are different models of cloud. We don't want to go into the technical details, but let's say PaaS or the SaaS or the different models. We as a pharma company, we wanted to focus on the business processes. We want to focus on the requirements. But all those, infrastructure-related activities, it's a project on its own, even before you start an MES project. So that's taking a lot of time. It's costing a lot, the resources. And even after, the system goes live, even to maintain it on all those upgrades, time and again, you have to wait for those future upgrades. You always want the latest and the greatest of the software in the production. But with the validation activities, what we have to do on the customer end, it takes a lot of effort. So with the cloud being the future, and that's definitely going to shape how the software is being pushed from the development side of things to the productive environment.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because this seems to really be an enabling component of MES. But what's interesting too is you picked up on not only cloud, but also the infrastructure. So do you want to talk a little bit about how even from an infrastructure standpoint, things have to change in order to set a foundation for the future, which in this case, I'm sure is everything from Wi-Fi and facilities to network changes to you name it within the overall architecture of the environment.
Yeah, that's what this IaaS, the infrastructure as a service, is one model where many people are looking at it. I'm a big friend of SaaS, the service as a software provider, being from the computer science background. You maintain the software, you give the latest functionalities. We just try to use the system and as an end user. So these three different paradigms has their own advantages and disadvantages. But in the end, it's always an organizational decision to know which one has its merit for them. But infrastructure has been, I'm sorry to say, is a big headache for many of the IT MES projects to be even kicked off. I mean, I don't know how Alan sees it as well.
For me, it's like, I don't care, is it a cloud or something else? From end user perspective, I want that the system is running, that it's fast, that it's reliable, that I can upgrade fast, that I can do changes fast. So, I mean...
Obviously doesn't work in quality.
Of course.
Yeah, Alan spent most of his career in quality. So this is really fascinating because this whole conversation is about how do you scale an MES to the future. And I think there's this assumption that's got to be made that this has to be in place in order to hit this level of scale, which I think is interesting. Were there any learnings from the conversation on cloud? Had anybody gone fully cloud end to end just yet?
I'll be happy if we can bring them on stage if they're...
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Well, fantastic. So now moving into the next piece of it, because that's kind of an enabling layer for MES of the future. What do we even think the future of this space is going to look like? And then working backwards then to what we think manufacturing will look like. So any thoughts on what we think, what does the industry look like 10, 20 years from now? And how does manufacturing play a part in that?
You want to pick? Go ahead.
Well, it will be much more... let's say, faster in terms of that you will need to deliver and do things faster. There will be no time to do all of analysis and like investigations, what happened. So you will get the order and you will need to ship the product tomorrow because that will be expected of you. And if you need 3 months to do product validation, it will be like, you are slow.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the future, the next 10 years will be more the no-code based. We're tired and sick of all those, the configurations and all those things. So that definitely will play a big role. And then the drag and drop tools. I mean, we don't want, let's say, the recipe authors struggle with those MBR designing, with those complex logics, or just a drag and drop, like a pictorial representation or a graphical programming. And then the third one is always a connection with the different IoT devices so that we have a common platform. So, I mean, time and again, we struggle with the interfaces, with different messages being exchanged between the systems. So you have different terminologies and different technologies for it. But at the end, the future is to always connect the MES with the IoT, let's say in an ideal world is in one platform. And of course, as I mentioned, the services with the different platforms that would, so the idea for me, key is a no-code and the drag and drop so that the pharma companies spend more time on their business process. And workflow management is also something where I think this could be the future, where the system can orchestrate, the different workflows in the systems where the business can imagine those. We are not tied up to the workflows what the MES vendors gives in, but instead you have your own visionary and innovation of creating those workflows so the system is able to provide those. So that's pretty much I vision. That's an ideal world. And
far, far future.
Far, far future.
Why? Why is it the far, far future? You said 10 years.
Yeah, what does it look like in 10 years from now? Yeah.
You should be able to run your facility from one of these in 10 years. Not just look at what's happening in your facility, but actually control a facility from one of these.
And I think that's what's really interesting, and that's what one of the talks were about like potentially what does a dark factory look like in the future, where it's a lot more automation, it's a lot more accessible. We may not get fully to dark, but I do fundamentally believe that there is going to be a shift in terms of how we think about it, because cell and gene in particular, I think, is the big wild card in this space, because we went from making many pills in a batch to now one batch for one patient, and this is a pretty radical shift in how we think about MES systems in general, and not only in one big giant facility, but what happens when we push closer to the hospital too. It's a pretty interesting challenge. But I'd be curious to hear from the audience, if one wants to share some from the breakout sessions, what do we think the future of this industry even does start to look like as this enabling thread? Because once we start to define that, then we could talk about how do we scale it.
Or does anybody find the idea of being able to run a facility from your phone in a decade offensive? Are we 100 years away from that, or are we 10 years away from that? Because I think that's a fascinating conversation. The people I talk to at work, some of them get it, and some of them, I'm talking to them about using devices and using, smart glasses and NIMI wristbands, And they look at me like, hang on, yeah, Alan, that's Star Trek. That's another 10 years away. And I'm like, no, you can buy this and implement it today. There are products on the market that take a week to implement if you're not in a production environment. If you've got a pilot plant that you can play with, it's easy to do. Easy. It's not complicated. If you're trying to implement in a production environment, yeah, you've got to fight with QA, ops, all of that, which you're not necessarily interested in doing. But I think if you take GMP out of the equation and QA out of the equation briefly, I think if you could build a factory without having to worry about IT resource requirements, IT restrictions, QA restrictions, and GMP, could you do that and build one that you could control from an iPad within a decade? And I think you could do it today with the tech that's available today. That's not even taking into account the tech we don't know about that's going to come in the next 10 years, like what you're doing.
Yeah, we obviously fundamentally believe you can do it today. So it's really kind of fascinating because there's different levels to all of this. And you brought up QA, because I know you spent a long time in quality, and obviously you gave a talk on Val. So the future of these systems, you talked about how using Val Genesis will really help your team deliver on validation faster, because these new updates will start to come really quickly as you scale these systems. So kind of curious to hear your thoughts about what happens when there's many more software vendors releasing once a week, or maybe not that crazy, but what happens when these updates become very frequent, because the future of this software will start to move pretty quickly.
Yeah, the continuous integration is always the key to it. I mean, everybody wants the latest functionalities in the productive environment. Yes, of course, there's always a struggle from the quality or from the compliance, but that's an ideal world we want in it, right? So I still remember there are functionalities. It takes ages or 2-3 years that the customer were not able to do it because the upgrade is difficult, and we don't want that. I mean, of course, 1 week it's a bit more exaggerated.
Yeah, it's a little exaggerated, yeah.
So probably once in a month, patches. I think that's pretty good, and once in a quarter. I think that's where the industry should look into it, where the continuous integration plays an important role, where we have the latest version from the vendor, which goes into the system. Of course, as you mentioned, the quality, and it also has to be looked in. Of course, the agile validation comes in, which can use on the risk-based methodologies. So we focus more on the functionalities and not on the documentation. This is a mindset change. It takes maybe 10 years. I mean, if we are optimistic.
Yeah, but it needs to. The upgrades needs to be seamless. Like, you cannot have downtime of 1 day every month because you are doing the upgrade, because no operations will not accept it.
Yeah, the downtime is always a topic.
And currently, like doing MES upgrade, it's not just a day. It's at least a weekend.
Yeah.
And you are happy if they are not working on the weekends, so you can do it. But
and you don't want to force them to work all 4 weekends.
And if it's 24/7 operation, then you have a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I think this is where these new cloud technologies in particular, not just like a hybrid cloud, but truly cloud. So we built Apprentice to be infrastructure as a service, like full infrastructure as code and everything, and our upgrades are instant. You just have to choose the window you want to do the upgrade in. So there's no turnover time. It's more just getting your validation ready. And what you talked about, which is really interesting, is do we see a point where we do get to computer systems assurance versus computer systems validation, and move it from more about the documentation piece to more of the functionality piece? Do you think we'll ever get to CSA soon?
Yeah, why not?
I know it requires the FDA to actually put in some guidance here, but...
Okay, so, all right, so I'm not going to plug you, but...
No, please don't. No, that's not the point of this.
But that is part of the point of the infrastructure, and to your point, like, you went with Val Genesis as a solution, which is software as a service, and it's configurable, and you configure it to meet your own needs. But the downtime, right? Why is there downtime? So if you have a solution where you do recovery, you do disaster recovery at a predetermined frequency, then you know that your system is stable. Nobody does disaster recovery. Maybe we do it once every 12 months or once every 2 or 3 years. When's the last time anybody did a disaster recovery that was successful? Last one we did, we gave up after 3 months because we hadn't recovered the data for our SAP system after 3 months. So, okay, guys, our disaster recovery doesn't work. What do we do now? Because we don't know. If we lose this server, we lose the last 10 years of data. You haven't been able to recover. And IT was like, give us another couple of days. No, you've had 3 months. So you must build that into your system.
Right. As a vendor, we're required to at this point now. Yeah.
So we do, we get our IT guys to do that, and we do tapes, and we do X, Y, Z. Now that goes away, and it's your problem, and you have to prove to me that you have disaster recovery, and you have backup, and you have X, Y, Z. So that when you do an upgrade, if there's a problem, I go back to yesterday's version.
That's right. Well,
and you deal with the problem.
Or even down to where our RPO, RTO is down to the minutes, and we're trying to get even.
Worst case scenario, yesterday's version, half an hour ago. You deal with the problem that came up during the upgrade, and I'll keep going with yesterday's version of the application or the software or the infrastructure, because you've backed all that up and you're doing it constantly. Because data costs nothing anymore. Space costs nothing anymore.
It's incredibly fascinating, because what we're talking about here is in order to get to the MES of the future, there's like enabling components in all of this. And I think even culture is one of those too. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about, because I know, Alan, your opinion about culture internally around adopting some of these new technologies. But that has to be a fundamental change management component of all this, which we've heard today as well. But it'd be interesting to hear if anyone else wants to talk about, especially from these breakout sessions, about all this MES of the future. What do we think culturally is going to have to shift to in order to not only deliver on all these buildups, cloud, infra, Val deployments, but how do we even get folks to adopt some of this type of techniques in life sciences?
I mean, there's different flavors to it. I mean, one thing is connecting the MES with the IoT systems seamlessly. I had a good conversation with Uwe, who has been really working a lot on the plug-and-play bioform device. So it's in a very nascent stage, but the idea is to have a single bioreactor which connects to the different systems. So give me a standard technology where I don't have to worry about n number of different connectors. Let's have an industry standard a plug-and-play connector, then it connects to the different systems. So that's pretty much where I think the hardware devices or the different machines would like to have integrated with the MES. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of standards, Nemur, and also there are other plug-and-play standards coming in. But it seems it's a long way through. I mean, we are just started the journey. It will definitely take probably a decade. So that's one thing. And as you said about the mindset, right? I mean, I like to bring a simple quote about the mindset of the digitalization. I mean, I was just asking a friend, okay, I mean, I was really surprised when I voted in Germany in paper. So I was asking one of the industrialized nations of the world, why isn't electronic? So, and just on a reverse, I mean, when I was voting back in India, so it was 1.3 billion, they have electronic voting. So it's just the mindset change, how you want to change the paper into the electronic. So just imagine it's just the political way of looking at it, but a GMP system, a regulated system. The patients are going to use those products. So how difficult it's for the people to have those mindset change. I mean, same holds good, which I quoted also when you go in the flight. So I don't use, let's say, the paper, so I choose your electronic check-in. Same holds good in the... So this has to come in over a period of time that we are contributing to the digitalization, not they think as this is a headache for me. And the same holds good in the MES world, where I don't use paper, but I want to do it in a different way. But I mean, all those jargons comes in with the IoT devices and all those cloud-based. But it's actually the mindset which has to change that I want to have a digital system, which is paperless. So it's a journey, and it takes its own time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Have you guys seen any change in the cultural mindset in the last year, given what we've seen with COVID and everything? I'd be curious to hear.
The expectations are that now everything can be done remotely, and it can be done digitalized. We were used to work, you have to go to the factory every day, like 8 to 4, spend time there, but now we see that obviously it doesn't need to be, and I think also people are expecting that things are going to change because they saw in the regular life that the stuff is possible to do electronically. So when QA gets more buy-in, I think that's because usually QA is still holding back, at least in Teva. They don't want to change. They like to on their ways of working. So when they start asking for delivering faster results, doing the things electronically, we will be much faster. So I hope that QA will get that soon, because without that,
it's easy. I mean, once the regulations, the other thing is interesting, and can I throw this out, because I've got loads of people who are really clever here, obviously. I moved from quality, I worked in validation and quality and computer systems and operations for a long time. And I moved into R&D last year, just so I could play with digital, because I can't play with digital in the operations field because nobody will let me. So I could do it in R&D, and it's fun. But there are no regulations for R&D. So when I worked for quality, it was easy. I just went and found the FDA or the EU GMPs, learned them off by heart, and we had a reason for doing things. So we're doing this because if we don't, we will get pinged. Somebody will come in and slap us on the wrist. In R&D, and trying to apply a quality management system or some type of a quality concept to R&D, I was like, where's the regulatory guidance that I can look for, that I can just read and it'll tell me what to do? And apart from some of the ICH stuff, ICH 10 and 12, you can use those, but they're very general. So am I missing something? Is there an R&D guideline out there from cell line development all the way up to, once you get the clinical, it kind of gets a bit more close to GMP. But there seems to be a no man's land, like a demilitarized zone in between. And our QA people want to implement the same quality management system that we have in the rest of the facility that I helped build. And I'm trying to say, guys, you can't do that. It's not fit for purpose. Because you're going to pour quicksand on or concrete on these people, and they won't be able to develop products. Yeah. And so one of the things was digital. We can digitize this and make it faster. And if I can convince the quality guys that we can digitize in the R&D environment and it's not non-compliant, then maybe I can convince the operations people that we can digitize in the operations environment and it's not non-compliant. It's sneaky, but you might get away with it.
Good approach.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because we're really touching on a lot of different layers here that have to be enabling in order to move into this new future state that we all want to see. I'd be curious from the audience if there are any other thoughts around what may be inhibitors to some of this scale. We actually have a few questions. Yeah.
Best practice. For sure, if you customize it, then it's very hard to deal with that. It would be great to get validated solutions, that will be updated quickly. Like Tesla, you get it once a month, you get an update, and you're not validated, you just try it, right? Because you count on the vendor.
Brilliant example. Tesla is a brilliant example. Full self-driving is genius. What they're trying to do with full self-driving, that's a fully validated car. That you can trust the car to drive itself. It's a fully validated car. You can go to sleep in the back. But full self-driving is still, I don't know if anybody's driven a Tesla. I mean, when you put into... No, but the principle is that, But if you go into automatic mode, it's brilliant. It's really, really clever. But I think full self-driving is that.
Well, that's what's so interesting, because we share the same exact problem. And this is this movement towards CSA, Computer Systems Assurance, where it does, if you put it back on the vendor, it will help, I think, things go faster. So it's interesting, one of the most enabling factors or inhibitors of this growth is how do we get the industry to have more confidence in CSA versus CSV? Because if it is put on the vendor and we could do IQ, OQ, and then the customer just does some PQ, let's rock and roll, because then we can start to do updates, I think, as a faster movement.
But you need to prove that it's working.
Well, yeah, and that's where
that's the problem, because when we are doing the validation, we see stuff that is not working, so we need to correct. And then You are not trusting the vendor. That
Yeah, it's interesting.
We did an update to Viva
Yeah.
last year, and they put in a new module. And it was so it was supposed to be a 3-month implementation. It was 6 months in, and they were still late. And I was like, guys, what's the problem? Why is it taking so long? Because we were considering using Viva for non-GMP documents, but because it was taking so long, that just went out the window. Why is it taking so long? Well, we've written the printing the reports, validating the printing function for the reports isn't working the way we thought it would, and it's not working the way we did it the first time, and it's slowing us down. I'm like, why are we printing stuff out of an electronic document management system? When's the last time you saw somebody walking around in Star Trek with a bunch of papers? Because they have computers, they have...
But I think what you're touching on is the whole, like for CSA, it's all risk-based approach. And I think that if we can start to adopt, instead of every single functionality working as spec, and having it more about the risky features truly working and have the confidence around that via test automation and other types of practices, maybe we could get there.
So we pay you to do it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Please go beat us up. Any other feedback? Yeah.
I completely agree. We can deploy a Viva system in 1,000 hours, and in an MES world, we don't even get to user requirements.
I don't understand. I don't know. And to your point about validation, so I used to be the global head of validation for Activis. That was my previous life when I used to travel around the world and live in hotel rooms. And every time I went to a site and had a conversation with people locally, it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this validation? Because if they weren't able to explain it to me, we just stopped until everybody understood why we were doing this. And I think we've gotten to a point in the industry now where there's a lot of people who are doing this and they don't understand why. And it's pointless. It's a complete waste of time because they don't know why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
And the point to it is trusting your suppliers to deliver the quality.
Yeah.
Exactly. And once you digitize, data integrity is, it's inherent once you digitize. The ability to change stuff is inherent. There was somebody made the point earlier about audit trails. You don't dump everything in and call it an audit trail. You selectively say, this is the critical data. This is the stuff I'm going to trail and control. And being smart about it.
Yeah.
And that's to your point as well, is that if we're smart about it, it doesn't have to be painful. And digitizing is actually, it'll get us out of a rut that we're already in.
Yep.
Sorry.
This was great. And would love to continue this in happy hour here because I think what we're picking up on is that there's definitely things that need to be enabled in order to scale the future of MES. I think we're picking up on some key pain points, some sensitive areas, but thank you everybody, appreciate the time, and yeah, you want to throw in some extra thoughts?
I mean, it's just a great discussion and so passionate. I was tempted to join that, but unfortunately I have also to watch the time. So thank you very much to the whole panel.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
For the very interesting, very inspiring and passionate discussion. Thanks very much.
Thank you.